What's up, Wolverine fans? Jack here, another episode of the Big and Bold College Football Show. Today, talking about that Michigan at Nebraska game. Michigan pulled away at the end to win 32-29 in what was a very contested game. And Michigan had to do something on Saturday that it hasn't had to do all season, which was come back from a point deficit. Michigan hadn't been down on the scoreboard all season. So that's kind of crazy to consider, they played 5 games, weren't down all year. But in the third quarter, Nebraska took a lead. They outscored Michigan 22-6 in the third quarter. Michigan scored a Hassan Haskins touchdown in the third, but opted to go for the 2-point conversion, which was a call I agreed with. Michigan did not get the 2-point conversion, and it was a 19-7 game. But like I said, Nebraska outscored them 22-6 in the third, and Nebraska took a 3-point lead in the third quarter. Michigan scored a much-needed touchdown off the feet of Blake Corum. He had a 29-yard touchdown run. Definitely needed that in the fourth quarter. Then, of course, Adrian Martinez scores to take another 3-point lead, and Jake Moody did what it appears he does best, which is scored not one but 2 clutch field goals to tie the game 29-29 and then take a 3-point lead 32-29. So Michigan wins, faced a lot of adversity in this game, had to deal with some things they hadn't dealt with up until that point in the season. So I'm going to talk about that. Going to talk about my 3 key notes heading into the game, and we're going to talk about how much of those mattered or didn't matter. The 3 things I was, following heading into the game. Then I'm going to talk about Michigan's keys to victory, and then get into the good, the bad, and the ugly from this contest. So we're going to talk about the offense and the defense in this one. Going to talk about Nebraska. But without further ado, let's get into those key notes that I had heading into the game. You're aware of them if you listened to my preview heading into this contest. And my first was, can Michigan get to the quarterback like it did last week against Wisconsin? That was a huge reason they were able to beat Wisconsin, was they had 6 sacks. Only had 1 in this matchup. That did come by way of David Ojabo, who had another strong game. But the funny thing is that Michigan's defensive line was one of the highest graded by Pro Football Focus last week. So that was really interesting. But if you watch the game, Michigan collapsed the pocket constantly. They were all over Adrian Martinez, but Martinez is the best playmaker Michigan's played up until this point at quarterback, and he was able to get out of the pocket all game and use his speed and athleticism to avoid taking sacks. They did contain him more so than in previous weeks. He only had 38 yards on the ground, but that's not really the most telling thing from that. 38 yards and a touchdown is solid, but nothing great for what Martinez can do, considering he's Nebraska's leading rusher on the season. But his ability to get out of the pocket and work with broken plays is what made playing Nebraska so difficult. Not only do they scheme up wild plays on offense and it's hard to predict what they'll do, but Martinez is able to get out of the pocket and hurt a defense. So they weren't able to get to the quarterback like they did against Wisconsin, but that's because of the fact that, Graham Mertz is a very different quarterback from Adrian Martinez. Can't run like he could. So they were able to pressure the quarterback and make life hard for him, but he basically thrives on broken plays, so that's kind of why it went the way it did. My second main point was, can Michigan get the run game going like they did the first few games of the season? Against Rutgers, Michigan's run game was effectively shut down. They had a solid day running against Wisconsin, but it wasn't as good as it was those first few games of the season. And against Nebraska, they had over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. They were good for 4.9 yards a carry. And Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum, they combined for 34 carries for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, good for over 6 yards a carry. So their 2 main runners had a very good game on the ground. Most of it came in the second half, and that was much needed for Michigan to, win this football game. I mean, Hassan Haskins had a 50-yard run, not to mention his 2 touchdowns in the game, so he was their offensive MVP. And then Blake Corum had that 29-yard touchdown run that gave them the lead. They had to score there, and they really had to score a touchdown to stay in that game. And they got it right when they needed it. So that was huge for the Michigan offense. Really hoping to see them dominate Northwestern on the ground. Not necessarily because I think they'll have to or something, but I think it'll just be nice morally for the team and for the fans to watch that Michigan run game dominate an opponent again. And I think Northwestern is the perfect one to do that. Northwestern's run defense is terrible. You can look at the Nebraska game. You can look to the Michigan State game. Northwestern's run defense is putrid, and that's really concerning for that team. But that's besides the point. And my third key point heading into the game was, is Nebraska a legit team? Are they finally going to prove that they're a legitimate Big Ten team? Scott Frost has struggled to beat top 10 teams, even top 25 teams. I don't know if he's beaten a single top 25 team at Nebraska. And then they fight Oklahoma down to the end. They go into overtime with Michigan State, and they fight to the end with Michigan. But I've said before, Scott Frost has tied his hip to Adrian Martinez. And if you're going to tie your hip to a quarterback that is guaranteed to have a turnover or multiple turnovers in big moments, then that's what's going to happen, and that's what's happened to Scott Frost. And he hasn't made the quarterback change because Martinez is such a playmaker. And don't get me wrong, Martinez accounted for all 4 touchdowns in their game against the Wolverines this past weekend. So it's the double-edged sword. And if he's not going to have a defense that can put up, or a run game that's going to help support that, then that's what's going to happen to Nebraska, as long as Scott Frost and Adrian Martinez are out there as that head coach to quarterback duo. So, no, Nebraska's not a legit team. You almost feel bad for them with how many close games they've had, but they have had so many one-score games that just have not went their way that it's systemic at this point. 1, 2, 3, yeah, you can kind of understand that. But Nebraska has had this over Scott Frost's entire tenure with the program, and it's systemic. It's just what Nebraska is at this point. But let's take it back to the Wolverines here and look at their keys to victory in this game. This is what won them this football game. I'll point to one that I've covered already, and that is the Michigan run game. So I talked about how important it was before the game to get the run game going, and it did matter. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse with that one. But one of the most important pieces was Jake Moody. Jake Moody looks like an elite kicker in all of college football. He had to hit 4 clutch field goals, and he hit all 4 of them. He accounted for 12 points in the game just off of his field goals, made both of his extra points that the Wolverines attempted. And, so ultimately 14 points on the day. You really have to appreciate Jake Moody's performance. I mean, specifically those last 2 field goals. Kicking a field goal to tie the game 29-29, and then kicking a field goal to take the lead 32-29. That was huge. You have to really appreciate his performance in that game. And it goes to show that special teams really matters. People don't like to talk about special teams all that much, but it matters. And then the final key to victory, my third point, is the defense's ability to get turnovers. And again, it's systemic for Nebraska when it comes to Adrian Martinez. But Daxton Hill had his second interception of the season. I believe that was in the 3rd quarter. That was huge for the Wolverines to be able to keep points off the board, because they needed the defense to keep points off the board as much as they could. And Nebraska was scoring on every drive in that 3rd quarter. And so Michigan really had to get stops when they could. And it was with a turnover, but they did it. And Daxton Hill has showed that elite rangy ability that he has as a safety. And they can line him up at corner. And he's a fantastic cover man. He had another great play in the 4th quarter where he was step for step with the wide receiver, prevented a catch. Nebraska was moving down the field. And I'll use this minute here to talk about the Michigan defense. They played a good game, and Pro Football Focus was all over the Wolverines in a good way. But it's hard to believe that when you see them give up so many points in the 3rd quarter. But they did sew things up in the 4th, only giving up 1 touchdown. But they gave up some big plays. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but a 43-yard reception from Johnson, a 46-yard reception from Austin Allen. They only gave up 2 catches to Oliver Martin, but one was a 30-yard catch. So Nebraska was able to get big passes down the field, ultimately score on the Wolverines. So that was concerning, but they got 2 turnovers when they needed them. One was the Daxton Hill interception. The other was Brad Hawkins forcing a fumble on Adrian Martinez. They had about a minute left in the game, minute and a half, maybe more, and had to get down the field and at least score a field goal to tie the game. I believe they had one big pass down the field, and I thought, man, this is kaput. This is it for the Wolverines. Nebraska's either going to score the field goal or they're going to get a touchdown to win this game. But Brad Hawkins forced a fumble on Adrian Martinez, and that was it. So great job by the defense there, getting turnovers when you need to. You know, if you're going to give up points at a certain point in the game, be it the third quarter or all the second half, at least they got turnovers when they needed to. So that was really nice to see. Now, final point of the overview here for this game. I'm not going to let this be too long a video, but I've got the most important part of the overview at the end. But let's go with the good, the bad, and the ugly from this game, because there were 3 or 4 clear points in all of these here. The good was obviously the Michigan run game. Not to mention, and again, I talked about the run game already, but their defense, and this is one of my favorite points, has elite talent at all 3 levels. I mean, the defensive line, and I'll rope Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo into this, has some fantastic players. I mean, if it's not Aiden Hutchinson getting to the quarterback, it's David Ajabo. If it's not Chris Hinton, it's Mozzie Smith. And a player that has really surprised me is Chris Jenkins. You know, he's been a sort of a number 3 for them on the defensive line, at times taking starting snaps. So I'm really impressed with Michigan's defensive line. Sean Nua, the Michigan defensive line coach, has done a really good job there. And I'm very impressed with the defensive line play. Of course, Jake Moody, he's star of the show here. He had to hit all those field goals in order for Michigan to win this game, and he did. So, phenomenal job there. Time for the bad. And I'm going to start off with the defense. The cornerback play in this game was pretty disappointing. Jamon Green was their highest graded corner in this game. I think he gave up only a few catches, a little over 50 yards. But when Nebraska had to get big plays, they did it through the air. Again, 30 and 40 yard receptions in this game. That really helped keep Nebraska in it. It wasn't so much the run game that I was concerned about here. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ramir Johnson had 60 yards, 3.9 a carry. Adrian Martinez only had 38 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Could have been way worse when you look at his body of work so far in the year. But really, that through the air, I was a little nervous for the Wolverines. They gave up 3 touchdowns to Adrian Martinez. That's an area where they're going to need to work. You can see the Don Brown effect on these corners where they were recruited to play man coverage. You know, they're not very good at it. And the zone blitz scheme that Mike McDonald is running with the Wolverines helps to hide that deficiency at corner, but they're not zone corners. So that's a real issue for the Wolverines that they're going to have to adjust, because if that's what Adrian Martinez could do through the air, just wait until they play Ohio State. Next point, A.J. Henning. Really disappointed in him. Second-year wide receiver for the Wolverines, top recruited player in their 2020 class. With Roman Wilson sitting out this game due to a wrist injury, I really thought A.J. Henning was going to step up here. But he did not register a single catch in the game, and he was used to return punts, and he nearly fumbled the ball. And that could have sealed the Wolverines' fate. If they don't recover that football, Michigan is screwed. So he had no impact in returning punts. He did not carry the football like we've seen him before, where he's been used on jet sweeps, and he has done well there. But what are they seeing in practice to where he's not seeing the field? I wasn't surprised that Cornelius Johnson and Dalen Baldwin led the way for the wide receiving room, but A.J. Henning's lack of involvement is a little concerning to me. Why is he not at the point we thought he would be, where all season long he hasn't been asked to catch the football? That's been Roman Wilson. It's a little concerned about that, considering I'm a big A.J. Henning fan. But you can see what the lack of speed does to the offensive passing game, where obviously Ronnie Bell is out, lost him week 1. But Roman Wilson going down did not help them. Now they have speed. A.J. Henning's got speed. Roman Wilson has speed, but he was out in the game. Christian Dixon, very quick player, but he's a freshman. So when speed's not being utilized in the passing game, it hurts them. And then the last thing for me was their interior offensive line. They rotated 5 different guards out there because of injury. I would like to see that get corrected over the bye week. Let guys get healthy. re-solidify your offensive line. I'm still not sure where I believe they're at. They looked outmatched against Rutgers. They had a much better game against Wisconsin. And then injuries to the interior offensive line kind of hurt them in this game against Nebraska. So finally, here we are, the ugly. And I think this is pretty obvious. You guys have probably been waiting for this if you still stuck around for the end of the episode. Cade McNamara did not have a good game. He was 22 for 38, 255 yards, and threw his first interception of his career as a Wolverine, which in itself is impressive. But he only completed 57% of his passes against Nebraska, and he had very few impactful throws. There were opportunities for him to improve his stat sheet. Don't get me wrong, but he overthrew Dalen Baldwin at one point. At another throw, he underthrew him. So he missed a few guys in this game and threw a bad interception with a bad read. So I'm a little more concerned about Cade McNamara at this point than I was before. After last week when he played Wisconsin, he had his best game of the year against Wisconsin. But he had sub 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. And even still, the Michigan defense is the primary reason I think they won that contest, not the offense. At no point on the season have I felt like Cade McNamara has won them a game. He has done just enough to get by. And I just don't think that is enough for the Wolverines to win more than 9 games this year. And when you really look at his season, he threw 2 touchdowns against Wisconsin, 1 against Northern Illinois, another 2 against Western Michigan. So against, legitimate competition, I only count 2 touchdowns. Yeah, he threw 2 against Western Michigan, great. He threw 1 against Northern Illinois, great, who cares? So in 4 games against legitimate competition this year, Washington, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Nebraska, he's thrown 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. That does not cut it. That is not good enough for them. They've shown 2 weeks now against Rutgers and against Wisconsin that they don't have to run the ball to an elite degree to win. But Cade McNamara is not the quarterback for them. You can't throw 2 touchdowns against 4 quality opponents and expect for them to continue winning games. And I get it. Michigan is 8th ranked team in the country, 6-0, and he has been the quarterback for them, but he has not led them to victories. And for that reason, I think Cade McNamara is going to have to be replaced. Now you look at his stat sheet on his career, 10 touchdowns to 1 interception. Wow, that really jumps off the page. But this year, against teams with a pulse, he has not done anything, or at least next to nothing. And 4 of those touchdowns last year came against Rutgers. I'm just not a believer in Cade McNamara anymore. And it's hard to say that you should address an issue before Michigan starts losing games, but I think that they should be thankful they're in that position where they can look and say, wow, we're still a top 10 team, we're an undefeated team halfway through the year, we haven't lost a football game. And here's where I think Michigan should go moving forward. You have the bye week strategically placed in front of you to prep J.J. McCarthy to start. Now, obviously, we haven't seen a lot of him. He's 9 of 14, 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. He threw 1 pass against Wisconsin. It was a beautifully thrown ball in garbage time. Hit Dalen Baldwin for a score. Threw another beautifully thrown ball against Western Michigan for a touchdown, also to Dalen Baldwin. Very talented freshman, 5-star out of high school, clearly the quarterback of the future for them. After the bye week, you have a soft Northwestern team that they are clearly going to outmatch and play in the big house. So why not prep J.J. McCarthy in the bye week to play Northwestern, to start the game? If you see too much in practice you don't like, okay, maybe you put a bullet in it. If he looks rough against Northwestern, okay, you revert back to Cade McNamara. But everyone's mind has shifted to the Michigan State game. Everyone's mind. Because Northwestern is a soft opponent, because Michigan gets to play them off a bye week, and because Michigan gets to play them at home. So nobody's worried about Northwestern. It's the Michigan State game in East Lansing. And you know the number one problem against Michigan State that they're going to have is that Peyton Thorne has far and away been the better quarterback if you're going to stack him up with Cade McNamara. If they roll with Cade the remainder of the season and they go 3-3 in those last 6 games, let's say they beat Maryland and Northwestern and Indiana, the games that they're expected to win, and they lose to Michigan State or Penn State and Ohio State, it goes pretty much exactly how you think it's going to go. I think people are going to be a lot more disappointed than if they started J.J. McCarthy and they went 3-3 in those games. But 9-3 with how the Wolverines have started, I don't think should be accepted. I did have them going 9-3 in the offseason. But with the start they've had, taking down Wisconsin, showing that their defense is playing above what we thought it would, and that they have an incredible run game, I think it's time to start J.J. McCarthy. It's something Harbaugh hasn't been willing to do in the past in his tenure, but considering they've played a lot of aggressive football, they're rolling with it with a lot of young players and young coaches, why not play J.J.? Cade's had multiple opportunities to show that he's the guy for them, and he hasn't. He's shown that he can be the quarterback for them and they can win football games, but it's very likely they're going to play 3 top 10 teams in these final 6 games of the season. 2 of those are on the road. The third is against Ohio State in the Big House, where it hasn't mattered where you play them. So you might as well give it your all and play the freshman who's the quarterback of the future for you anyway. And if you have to go back to Cade, you know what you're going to get. And that's subpar quarterback play. So that's how I rationalize their quarterback situation. They're blessed to be 6-0. They get the bye week. They get a soft opponent to roll out JJ. In my honest opinion, I think that's what they should go with. Will they? Who's to say? I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cade McNamara was the starter against Northwestern. But what I would be much more upset about is if Cade looks just as average as he has in the past against Northwestern, and they feel the need to play JJ against Michigan State. Maybe not to start the game, but in the middle of the game, and he shows those flashes. And maybe they should have rolled with JJ in the first place against Michigan State. But time will tell with that one. Obviously, people are going to really have their eye on this Northwestern game because we want to know, is Cade going to be the starter? I personally don't think he should. And the number one thing I point to is, again, against 3 Big Ten teams and Pac-12 opponent Washington, he has 2 touchdowns. That to me is not going to cut it. Yeah, there's a lack of interceptions, but the interception he did throw was a very poorly timed interception against Nebraska. I don't know what happened to the Cade McNamara of last year when he came in and saved the day against Rutgers. But quite honestly, if you look at his other 2 performances, specifically that game where he played against Penn State, he did not look like the same player against Penn State last year. Granted, he went down with injury. Who knows how he could have improved from that point. But quite honestly, when you look at the Rutgers game from last year, the Penn State game from last year, and his body of work this season, it looks a lot more like that Penn State game last season. But we don't even have to talk about last year. It's a waste of breath because what we've seen this year is subpar quarterback play. And if you want further reinforcement that maybe Michigan should make that switch, Cade McNamara hasn't thrown a lot of picks. 5 touchdowns on the year, 1 interception. Peyton Thorne from Michigan State has 14 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. And that's just straight touchdown to interception ratio. That's not even breaking down the other stats that are out there to discuss. But trying not to get too ahead of myself here, right? This was a Nebraska breakdown, not jumping another week, technically 2 weeks, and getting into the Michigan State game. But that's my opinion on the quarterback situation. This weekend, with it being a bye week, I'm going to give you guys a report card of sorts for what Michigan has done thus far in the season. I'm going to talk about each positional group, give them a ranking, give you the overall score of the offense, defense, coaching staff, special teams, blah, 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 and give you my cumulative rating for the Wolverines. Now, of course, they're 6-0 in a top 10 team, so they're going to get a positive ranking in most areas. But check that video out. That's coming this weekend. Please check out my video I'm dropping this week as well, where I talk about last weekend's assortment of insane football games we had. I made the prediction that it could be the best weekend of the year, and I stand firm on that prediction with just how many great games we had. So thank you for listening, everybody. This video went a little longer than I intended it to, but you had a very competitive game there against Nebraska, and I had to talk about the quarterback position a little bit. So thank you for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think Michigan should do at quarterback, and enjoy the rest of your week.